No edge.
So the VEDA prompt today is to make a video response to another video. I'm going to talk about edges and link of 2 Vlogmas videos below. I remember reading one of Seth Godin's books, and he talked about seeking the tension and how boundaries are places where Hank describes biomes overlapping and tension happening in a single space. And he says the edge effect exists outside of ecology. It happens with people, it happens with things that we do, it happens with ideas and cultures and the definition of words. It happens basically everywhere, and some of it's noticeable and some of it actually isn't very noticeable. When John mentioned the idea of noticing and being content with seeing the edge and not necessarily thinking you have to chase after it. He mentions edgelessness, the edgelessness of the world, or the idea that those biomes are always overlapping. Sometimes we create walls with the biomes instead of letting them overlap and mingle and be more productive because of the idea of challenge and tension. Like when I was in high school, there was a lot of tension in productivity and ideas and what I was learning and being tested in the things in youth leadership I did. And now I recognize that it's more me being content and looking at the edge rather than participating in it just because the natural progression of life. We go through different periods of conflict and challenge and then sort of routine and settling and then more challenge. Ideologic diversity is not the sign of a divided nation, it's a sign of a thoughtful nation, is what Hank said in his edge video. And I agree with that because we let cultures and ideas overlap and understand one another, see the commonality of those ideas, the value that we have in other people and things that are different, like looking at the constants within and not so much just the surface and the variables. Seth Godin today blogged about edges on his blog. He said that really interesting conversations happen around edges because edges are risky places. Maybe that's realizing we're always under somebody's horizon, or that's thinking, you know, like right now where I am, there's not really a transitionary period going on in the short term. Let me travel to the edge of the lake and see what's happening there. But it all depends on those overlapping biomes and what kind of challenge and initiative is happening. As a big proponent of leadership images as ideas, seeing change through the lens of ecology and then through other lenses where you're talking about boundaries that not only exist in the physical world but boundaries of ideas, that sort of gives a tactile feeling to the idea, and you can sort of picture how that might happen in here instead of out here. This goes back to what I was talking about before with seeing reality as it is as best we can, and then making sure that we don't believe perspectives that say that there's already a monoculture. Like, there's a lot of diversity that we can see and challenge ourselves with. We can seek that tension and let things mix and let things stay diverse in the creation of biomes with these ideas and cultures that we create. We can't let those people warp that diverse reality that we have or make it seem like it's not. Central narratives, a story that we're telling ourselves at any given moment at any time, why things are happening, what's happening, how it's led up to this point, why it's the way it is now, that can be heavily influenced by the other narratives people have or the stuff that we decide to listen to from the narrative that we already occupy. It can strengthen the narrative we already have, or it can dramatically shift how we see the world, even if it's not true, and most of the time it's probably wrong because there's so much to understand. We can't take all of it in all at the same time and understand all of it. It's just not possible. Definitely concur with Hank that mixing those biomes and ideas and culture and recognizing, I think, the delusion or the lies and assumptions people tell us from their reality is really, really important. That way we can see it for what it is and the diverse stuff it all represents and appreciate that and celebrate that. The other video that's really interesting is Hank's video on the word cool and the idea of like the bleeding edge of collective selves and how culture's unconscious, and can we as a species actually deeply examine a culture's effect on our beliefs and the things that how culture affects us and what messages we want to actually discard and re-implement because, complicated. We collectively decide whether we're aware or not, so that's something that we have to think about. Are specific things we're facing in culture things that we want to stay or want to try to transition out? That's fascinating. Ideas. So I guess my question for you is, where do you see yourself seeking tension and where do you see yourself sort of in the middle of the lake looking at the edge out of contentment or out of fear or whatever you're thinking about? It's interesting to consider where we are and what do you think about all this. Go watch the Vlogbrothers videos and come back inspired and share in the comments. all about the edge for me. Edges are interesting. Sometimes themes just happen, you know? You hear the same thing 4 different times and you think of it as a cliche and then you go, wow, that's really fascinating. That needs to be shared. And lastly, to bring in the inverted U curve into this analogy, another quote by Seth Godin is, we live in the middle, but we understand at the edges. We understand where change and tension and challenge happen, because that is where it is extremely clear to us what exactly it is changing. Keep being you at TFTBA. Happy VEDA. See you tomorrow. Everybody Palka.